ready to start editing. Okay, this is going to be a great video if you've never used any kind of editing program. I'm going to show you the power of editing. To me, it's as important as getting the shot right in the camera, and we're going to go into the computer here and I'm going to show you why I feel that way. Stick around. So you have your images in Lightroom now, they're in the computer, and they're ready to be edited. So when you open up the Develop module, you're going to see all these tools that are presented to you. What I want to do in this video is give you a workflow. So you're going to start with the basic panel usually, and I'm going to show you, starting with the histogram and working your way down, how to use all the different tools. And the basic panel is very powerful, and it's going to show you in a global way. And when I say that in these videos, it'll be global and local. A local adjustment is when I take a specific tool and apply it to a portion of the image. I'm not editing the whole thing with a slider or anything. I'm adjusting little pieces of it. Global means if I raise the exposure, the entire image is going to get brighter. If I make the highlights go down, the whole image. So global adjustments affect the entire image, where the local adjustments will affect portions of the image that you choose. So in this video, we're going to learn how to use the basic panel, which are all global adjustments, and how it's going to affect the video. So we're going to dive into the computer here, and I'm going to show you how powerful an editing program can be and why you should be using one. So here we are on the basic panel, and I'm excited to show you this tutorial today because this is going to really get your editing going. This is where you can really make all of the global changes to your images. And when I say global, I mean it's going to affect the entire image. We're not going to use any of the local adjustments. We're just going to be changing the entire image as a whole. So I'm here in the library module. All of my folders that I have my images are over here. And right now I have my Disney January folder open. And inside that, I'm going to choose this image. So I clicked on it, and now I'm going to click on Develop on the top right here. And when I do that, I actually have the Y key pressed so I can show you before and after of this image. On the left hand side here, this is how my camera captured the image. It's a raw file, and this is what it looked like. And this is an edit I did to that file. So when I click Y, it brings me to the finished version or the edited version. Now on the right side here, it shows all the edits that I've made, but I'm going to zero those out, and now we're back to the original file. This is how the camera shot it. So inside of the basic panel, which is right here on the right side, and there's a thing I just want to show you before we get started. If you look here, these are all the different panels that you can open up, and when I click on one, it opens up, and the one above it or below it closes. So as I open them and close them, the one underneath it will close. And Lightroom is not set like this default. The way Lightroom is set is if you have this open and then you open another one, actually I'll show you. If you right click in here, when you come down to solo mode, if I unclick this and I open the basic panel, it's open, and then I can open the tone curve panel, and that's open, and transform. So now I have all of these different panels open all at once. So I'm constantly shifting around trying to get to what I want to do. When I click these, I'm going to close everything again, except the basic panel. And when I right click here, I'm going to hit solo mode. And when I check that off, what happens basically is as I go from panel to panel, it closes the previous one so that I'm not always shifting around here. So I'm in the tone curve here, but if I click basic, tone curve closes. Right at the very top, we have the choice of working in color or black and white. So this is where you'll, if you're going to use a color image, you don't have to touch anything, and you can get started with your edit. If you want to do a black and white image, you will change it to black and white, and then the sliders will work the same way on a black and white image that they do on a color image. You just obviously won't be affecting the color. And under down here, you'll notice the vibrance and the saturation sliders are grayed out. So for this tutorial, we're going to need working color. And now, this is something new Adobe just added to Lightroom, and these are color profiles. So what is a color profile? Inside your camera, if you've ever dug around in there, or maybe you went into the picture settings, it'll say standard, vivid, landscape. It'll give you choices, and it's almost like a preset for your camera. And what Adobe has done, instead of having presets that affect the sliders, and I'm going to show you that here on the left side, these are all presets that are built into Lightroom. And when you click on one, you know, they add a kind of like a filter, you know, like an Instagram filter. And you can see here on the right side, it affects the sliders. So when you click on one, the sliders move around. And you'll get a different look for each one of these. And these are something that you can create your own. You can use these, and as you hover over them, you can see it changes on the image. Okay. So we're not going to use one of those. We're going to zero it back out, and I'm going to close this panel. There's a little arrow here on the left where you can close it out. What Adobe has done has given you something similar here, and watch what happens as I click on them. It changes the image a little bit. It's going to add a color profile to the image. That's a black and white profile. So you can apply these to your image right out of the gate. So if you wanted it to have a little more pop, a little more color before you even start editing without affecting any of the sliders, you can add a color profile to it. Now over here are even more. So in here you have different presets. These are the ones I just showed you, and then down underneath there are other ones. So if you click open, let's say artistic, and let's see, you hover over them, you can see in the main window it gives you a preview of what it's going to look like. So if you want a different starting point for your image, you can certainly hover over these and choose to start here. Now if I decide I wanted to start here with artistic 4, I can close this, but none of the sliders have been affected. So it kind of happens in the background to the image, and you still have the full editing capacity of the basic panel, and it's not presetting any of your sliders like it did over here with the preset panel. So that's basically what this is, and it's kind of a neat new thing that you know, Adobe's added, and it gives you a little bit more creativity to start off in a different spot than you normally would. I'm going to zero this out again, and we're going to start in Adobe Color, and I'm fine with that because I want to show you how I would edit this image straight out of the gate, right out of the camera. If you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, sometimes we'll post before and after pictures, very similar to the way I started this video. And a lot of the questions we get are, you know, how do you do that? How do you get it from one to the other? You know, it's amazing. But really, everything that we do with those images starts right here in this panel. And if you look at this image, there's nothing spectacular about it. It's a picture of my camera. I'm not even sure why I was taking a picture of my camera, but I was just in Epcot, and for some reason I did. But this is a good example to show you the power of this program. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the white balance. Now, white balance is the color temperature of your image. So if you look here, this shows you how it's shot. And inside of here, I have different presets that are the same as the ones that are in my camera. But when I shoot in RAW, it doesn't matter if I use those because I can change them here. And so if I click on the daylight one, it warms up the image. If I click on the shade, it warms it up even more. Tungsten, it's going to give it a very blue cast. So these are all white balance presets, and you can go through them if you want. If you've shot in RAW, if you've shot in JPEG, the camera kind of bakes in what it thinks the white balance should be, and you won't have as much room to adjust it. Now, what's really happening is these two sliders are just being adjusted in a preset. So if I click on that, you'll see the sliders have moved, and I can just grab these and move it to where I want also. So you really are not limited by presets or what your camera thinks is right. You can just look at the image and decide what you want. If you want to make it a little more green, have a green cast to it, you can pull it to the left. If you want it to have a more of a magenta tone, you can pull it to the right. And if you double click on the word next to a slider, it will bring it back to the way it was shot. So this is how my camera captured it. There's another way to adjust the white balance also. If you grab this white balance eyedropper tool and you look for something that's a medium gray color in the image, so let's say something like this. I don't like that. So let me see what else could be medium. Maybe this. Yeah, that actually looks a little bit better. So you can actually look for something that's gray in your image and it will set the white balance for you. But like I said before, you can always just grab a slider, and if you want to warm it up, you can pull it one way, and if you want to cool it down, you can pull it the other way. I find for most of my images, the camera gets it pretty close. Usually images that are in the shade are going to be a little bluer, and the images that are out in the full sun will have a nice warm tone to them. But, you know, it's always adjustable right here. That's one of the reasons why we almost always shoot in RAW. So that's pretty much it for the white balance. Now we're going to head into the sliders here that affect your image the most. And exposure is exactly what you would think would be. It makes the image brighter, but in a global way. And as you can see, now you can see all the detail in the camera, but the whole background of the image is completely overexposed. And if you look at the histogram on the top, you can see that it's all the way to the right, and that this is going to be the brightest parts of your image. And the darker parts of your image will be here on the left side of the histogram. So if I take the exposure slider and go the other way with it, you'll see everything stacks up the other way, and now the image is too dark. So the idea is to use the histogram to let you know where you're at with your exposure. Okay, so I'm going to zero this out. You can double click on the name of the slider and it will bring it back to 0 for you. So the first thing I usually do is, instead of grabbing the exposure slider, I might want to bring it up a little bit here. But I want to get the detail back in the camera. So I'm going to use the shadow and highlight sliders. The shadow sliders is going to open up the shadows, and it's going to let you see the detail in the darkest part of your image. And the highlights are going to let you control some of the areas that are very bright in your image. So as you can see, the highlights really affect it. So now let's click Y and see the before and after. Just by using those two sliders, we've really brought out a lot of detail in the camera, knocked down a little bit of the highlights. So when I look at this image here, I'd actually want to bring the exposure down a little bit. Okay, and then you have the whites and blacks here. Now I adjust these also. You want to find a nice white point, and I use the histogram for that. As soon as I see that it's going to clip, which is this little triangle up in the top right, that's where I leave my white point. And if I click the Alt key and the slider at the same time, it'll show me if there's anything overexposed in my image. Now if I move the slider to the right, you'll see parts of the image start to be overexposed, and I don't want that. So I'm going to put it back to where nothing is overexposed. So right about there, and then you can see in the histogram the triangle's not activated. And the same thing with the black point in the image. Do the same thing. First I look at the histogram, and usually I don't need to click the Alt key because I know right about there is going to be good, but I'll show you anyway. Now if I take this and pull it to the left, you'll see these are all parts of the image that are completely black. Okay, you can't see them when I take my finger off here. Those are the darkest parts of the image. Let's find a good black point. I think I'm right about there. And that's good. So these are the major adjustments I would do to an image on a global level. So right now, I like the way this looks. It's pretty good. I'm actually going to raise the shadows up just a little bit more. I want to see a little bit more detail in the camera. So right there. Now under the presence section, you have 4 sliders. Clarity and dehaze are going to deal with the contrast and the tones in your image, and the vibrance and the saturation are going to be the color. Before I use the contrast slider, I actually use the clarity slider, and I will move this to the right, and as I move it to the right, you can see the image gets a lot more crunchy and contrasty. and if I move it to the left, it has a softer look to it. I almost never use it to the left. I'm always adding clarity to an image. So right there, I want to add a little definition to everything, make it a little crunchier. So I move it to the right a little bit. And Haze is a new slider that they've added last year to Lightroom, but they had it hidden down in the effects panel for some reason, and they brought it up here into the basic panel where it makes more sense. And what this does is, if you have an image that's maybe it's a foggy morning, or there's smoke in an image, or it just doesn't have a sharp look to it, you can take this slider and it's basically going to add contrast to the image. So, and if you go the other way, you can see what happens. So it's a powerful slider. But if you are ever confronted with an image where maybe it looks a little washed out, this is the slider to use. And bring it a little bit, and you don't have to add too much of it to get the effect you're looking for. So these two sliders are the ones I use to affect the contrast in the image rather than the actual contrast. But they all work together. So you have to find what works for you, and depending on the image you're working on, how you want to use them. And underneath the last two sliders are Vibrance and Saturation. Now, saturation we've all seen, and it's in every editing program from your phone into anything that you've ever used, Instagram, any kind of photo editing software, and it just boosts the color. And as you can see, the higher I go, the more saturated it looks, and the other way, it desaturates it down to almost black and white. I don't use it too often. I will use the Vibrance slider. It's a little less heavy-handed, and when you're working with portraits or an image where there are people in it, it doesn't seem to affect the skin tones as much. So it's a little better to use in those situations. So it affects the color, but just not as much. So if you just want to add a little bit of pop to an image, grab the Vibrance slider and just move it over a little bit. So if we go back to the before and after, it's a big difference. Now this image is really, something that I wouldn't use in any way, but I just wanted to see how it affects just, a few slider adjustments, and the image really changes quite a bit. Let's go back to the edited image. So that's pretty much how we would use the basic panel. Now, underneath that are some of the other more detailed panels that affect the image a little bit differently. But in here is where we do most of our global adjustments to the image. And just one other thing I wanted to mention is the crop tool in Lightroom. And these are all the local adjustments that you'll have in the develop module, but they put in the crop tool in with these adjustments. This is your spot removal tool, red eye, graduated filter, radial filter, and your adjustment brush. These will all give you tools to make local adjustments to your image, so you'll be just editing a certain part of the image, not the whole thing. The crop tool is in here also, and if you did want to crop your image without knowing how all of these other ones work, I just wanted to let you know where it is and how to use it quickly. Basically, you're going to have anchor points that you can grab and pull. Now the image is going to stay in the same aspect ratio that it was shot in, unless you unlock this little lock here. And now you can crop it freely. You can do whatever you want with it. There's a separate video we're doing on the crop tool. It'll explain how to use all this. So if you really want to get into cropping and aspect ratios and all that, watch that video. But this is just, if you're in the basic panel and you just want to do a quick crop, this is how you would do it. You just open this tool, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So if you wanted to mess around in here, it's very easy to figure out. So the image I chose was nothing special. It's a picture of my camera in Epcot. It's just a picture. I don't even know why I took it. I must have wanted to take a picture of my camera for some reason. But because it's in the shadows and it's dark, it really shows you how you can bring out detail in the dark parts and drop the, and the background was a little overexposed, and how we could adjust that. And, this is just with that one panel in there. And, there's a big difference from the way it was shot to the way it finished. If you like the video, please click like. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, please subscribe. for more of these type of videos and other photography and Disney related things. And if you have any questions, please, ask them in the comments, and we're happy to try to help you. But hopefully this will be good enough for you to reference back when you're sitting there staring at your screen and you're not sure what the next move is. Okay, see you in the next video.